All right, so to pick up where we left off yesterday, we had just finished making the Coke power up, Coke bottle power up. Click on it, and then the bear gets faster. He runs around. All right. And so there's a few things that I want to do today. One, I want that Coke bottle to spawn randomly. So it'll spawn within a range of the bear somewhere so that the user can click on it. After it's been clicked, it'll have like a timer that will tick down until it should respawn in a different location. So we'll write a function that does that. And what's cool about this is we're going to keep this behavior for other obstacles as well. So we're going to have two other props that the bear can interact with as well via collisions. One will be a positive prop, and one will be a negative one. So one will be if the bear collides with it, it actually penalizes the bear, and the other will be if it gets more time. So I was thinking of maybe something like a clock, like this pocket watch. We'll have that out there, and then if the bear collides with this, they get more time. So I'm just going to throw this out here, and I'm just going to resize it a little bit. All right, face with the bear here. Okay, and then we'll have it interact with this as well. Okay, and then for the bad prop, something that the bear doesn't want to collide with, or if they do, then maybe they lose some time, something like that. Let's see, what could we use for that? That's maybe this head of the pumpkin seems kind of evil looking here. All right, so pumpkins are bad. Clock and Coke bottles are good. And we'll have him interact with each of these. Right. So let's go ahead into, they're all props, so that's good. All right, so let's go into our prop function, and so we need a couple things here, right? One, we're gonna have to actually control how often the spawn happens. So we're gonna have to have some sort of internal timer for each of these things, where a function we can call to spawn them after they've been collected, so that once we know they were collected, maybe we will respawn them a few seconds later, something like that. We might add that in later. But what we want to start with is a prop procedure, and this is going to be spawn at random location. And the spawn at random location will work for all three of these. And all we're going to do is we're going to spawn it at a random location relative to the player himself. All right. So here's what we're going to do. This algorithm will look like this. We start with the object will start invisible. After it's invisible, it'll move and orient to the player instantly. So it's at the player, it's invisible. After that point, it will move a random direction away from the player, and then it will reappear. And so that'll be our algorithm for this here. So if you want to try and write this, go ahead and do that. You can pause the video, try and write it. All right, and otherwise, we're going to go right into it here. So the first thing we want to do is make the props opacity 0, and give this a duration of 0. And then we want to do this a second time, but set it to 1. All right, so that's our first and last. Object's going to start invisible, and then it's going to reappear. So we want to move and orient to the player instantly. Well, how do I know where the player is? I have to add a parameter in. So we want to add in a var parameter here. Call this the player. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay. And then we can have move and orient to the player. And this, we also want a duration of 0. And then doesn't really matter if we do that or not. But the clock, as you notice when I spawned it in, it's when it's at position 0. So these ones are fine. These are at Y position 0. The clock's actually at a Y position 0.24. When I put the clock at position 0, it actually goes into the floor. And so we want to move, we're going to make the props float a little bit, especially this pocket watch one. When we move and orient it to the bear, it's going to go all the way into the ground here. So, I mean, we could do a turn to face and then move 2, and that would work as well. Maybe let's do that instead, because that'll make this work out a little bit better. So let's go turn to face instead of move and orient to, we're going to turn to face the player. And then we will move to the player. So it'll be facing the player as it moves toward him. And now what we'll do is we will move after that. We'll move a random direction away from him. So we'll have to first turn a random amount between 0 and 1. And there's different ways to do this, but this will let us move any part of a full rotation. So turn right between 0 and 1, somewhere in there. And so we'll basically pick a direction to go. And then after we pick the direction to go, we'll move a certain amount. So we'll just have them move forward. And here we'll put in another random range. This time, let's give them a range between 10 and 15. And then begin and abruptly, begin and abruptly. Okay. And then finally, after we finish that, we'll turn the object opacity back to 1. So it'll move a random direction away from the player. We maybe want to just repeat this line of turn to face. I actually don't think we really need it here. I'm going to delete it the first time because move 2 will move it 2, and then it's going to turn a random direction. So the turn to face initially isn't useful. So we'll turn to face it at the end though, because at the end we want the player to be able to see it if the player like turns in that direction of wherever it is. So that's kind of what we're looking at with this. So let's go ahead and test this out. Now, how do we test this out? Well, let's have it so that every time we click on it, so after I click on it and set its opacity to 0 and I power up the bear, let's have, after this happens, have these happen together actually. Let's have after the bear gets powered up and the opacity set to 0, let's just have it spawn at a random location again. So let's have the Coca-Cola bottle spawn at random location relative to the bear. and I want to do this outside to do together. Get it there. All right, so let's see how that looks now. I'm going to go ahead and save this as day 5. Let's test this out. Select our bear. All right, so there's our Coke bottle. We click it, it disappears, and it spawns at another random location relative to the player. And you can see each time the bear gets a little bit faster. Maybe we should give them a point as well for clicking the Coke bottle. And so we could maybe do another, just like they score a point in update score. Let's maybe call update score, give it a point as well. Okay, so there we go. We have this working okay now. What we probably want to do before we start our code is actually have each of the props spawn at a random location. So we can copy this twice. We'll have the pocket watch spawn at a random location and the head of the pumpkin spawn at a random location. So now when we start, we'll see that they're actually spread out. There's the Coke bottle, there's the pumpkin, and there's the stopwatch. Okay, so what I thought was happening did actually happen with the clock here. It's in the ground. So what we might have to do is just also after, I think the move to actually does orient it and moves it down. So maybe we do need to turn to face it and move forward, get distance too, and that would have to be the way we have to do it. So instead of moving to, we can have it turn to face the player and then move forward, and then here we'd have to use a get distance to function. Get distance to the player, and then set this duration to 0. And now if you do that, the clock is still upright now. All right, so what we're going to do is now add in, so we have all the props spawning randomly. So what we're going to do next is we're going to have a penalty for colliding with the bad object. So if the bear collides with the pumpkin, if he runs it over, then we're going to have to penalize the bear, maybe take some time away. And if the bear runs into the clock object, we're going to give him more bonus time, give him a little bit more time so as he continues to power up. The other thing I'm going to change is I'm just going to add 1 to the bear speed because he's getting pretty fast pretty quick here. So I'm going to make him a little less powerful each time now that he can get multiple ones. But that's just a little effect here. So what we want to do now is go into collision listeners. Now I have to be honest with you guys about the collision listeners in Alice. They're sometimes finicky, especially when you're doing it with, like, if you're trying to collide with background objects. So things like it's pretty hard to make wall collisions work out well, for like if you want to do like a racing game. it's kind of difficult to make it so that like they have to follow a track. It is possible, but it's not the easiest thing to do. Generally speaking, the collisions they're just not optimized as they would be in other engines. I think in terms of using them, they're valid. But in terms of actually working all the way that you would want them to like work, I don't think they are that powerful for bigger objects. So they should work fine for this purpose because we're just colliding with two different props. So there's a couple in this position orientation one, and the one we're going to use is this collision start and collision end. But we're just going to look at collision start. Proximity enter and exit are similar, but this is if you get close to an object. Collision is if the two objects are actually in contact with one another. So we will add a collision start listener. From set A and set B, we're just going to pick a custom array for both these. So these are basically the two sets of objects you're going to say are colliding. So in this case, set 1 is going to be the player, the bear, and that's the only object in that array. The second array is going to be the two objects we can collide with. So the pocket watch and the head of pumpkin. Now, it might be useful to actually make these two different events because one of them we want to collide, and the other one we want to we want to collide with both. One of them we want to add time, one we want to take away time. But for right now, what we're going to do is we're just going to add a bonus time to this just to see that these will work. So we are going to go ahead and say let's assign time remaining to be time remaining. And let's just do some math on it, and we'll just give the player a bonus 5 seconds. Oh, so this one I click on, I can get faster now. I can collide with that. Maybe. Huh. That's what I'm talking about with these collisions. Yeah, so every time I go over it, you can see it adds the pumpkin doesn't really seem to be there it worked. Okay. All right, so it's adding some time here. See my timer is going up. The clock's working pretty much every time I run over it, which is nice. The pumpkin seems to be working, but sometimes it looks like it's a little bit off. And so what we're going to do is we're going to just change this a little bit by just moving this object up a little bit as well. So I'm just going to put it at 0.25. And so what this will do is hopefully give us a little bit of a better collision with set object. Let's see. 35, 38. Yep. Adding 5 seconds to our timer right here. All right. And I think one of the reasons why it looks a little bit delayed is because we're not automatically upping the set value of the timer text here. So I'm actually going to copy this line down into here as well, so that we'll update the timer whenever we modify the time. And then finally, what I want to do after this, so we can't continue to repeat, having this thing, keep giving us bonus time, is we want to set its opacity to 0. So I can actually get the thing from set A or get the thing from set B, but you can see like I don't actually have that much stuff that I can do with this. So you can compare things in Alice. Let me move this up actually. Sorry, I just realized my picture is blocking this. My fault. So we can add an if statement and try and see if we can compare these two things. I don't know what keys are. Oh, there you go. Okay, so probably S thing, and maybe we're just gonna see if this will work. So if the thing from set B is the pocket watch, let's see if we can have it. Maybe have the player say hello for that. And let's see if this works. Yeah, so there, when we collide with that, it looks good. But then when we collide over here, it still adds time, but it doesn't say hello. So we've now differentiated the objects with this if statement. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to only add time remaining inside the one. We're going to update the time either way, because in both cases we're going to be changing the value of it. But in the first one, I'm going to have time remaining +5, and then if I hit the if it's not the pocket watch, that means it's the pumpkin, and so we're going to change this to -5. So we'll add 5 or lose 5. In both cases, what I want to do after that is set the head of the pumpkin or the clock to a new location. So we'll spawn, if it's the head of the pumpkin, we'll spawn that at a random location. Or if it's the pocket watch, we'll spawn that at a random location, depending on what it is. So now these should move to new locations. The other thing you're probably seeing is I'm actually getting hit with it initially, which is interesting. I guess it doesn't really matter. Oh, there we go. It's spawned. All right, so I'm starting with 25, so that's fine. I can click on the Coke bottle. I can go faster. Click on the Coke bottle again. Going even faster. I can go get some more time over here. So now I can actually collect these clocks and continue to increase my time as I also try and, make the penguins run away from me. And if I keep getting the clocks, see, sometimes it's taking me far away. If I get the pumpkin, I lost some time there. The pumpkins were bad. Oh, my bear is so fast though. All right, and so I've got an okay game here going. I can collect things. I can hit a penalty, and I can save myself. There's now a challenge, and I ran out of time. And so my final score is 12. All right, so I mean, there's a few things we could look at. Maybe having the pumpkin like be spawn a little bit closer. So maybe this is too far. Maybe we want it to spawn a little bit further for the clock. Maybe spawn a little bit closer for the pumpkin. Maybe we could have the spawn distance get further from the player as the game goes on, or closer to the player as the game goes on, depending on how difficult we want to make this. But because like right now, there's no reason for the player to go over to this pumpkin. So yeah, let's do that. That'll probably be. I think that'll be what we wrap up with for today. Yeah, I showed you guys the collisions, randomly spawning the object. So tomorrow or Friday, I will have you guys do sound effects and music, as well as we'll try and write a restart function, which might be a little challenging. So we'll kind of see there. But I'm gonna add in one more thing into the spawn location. So under prop, I'm gonna add a property here for the prop that just is a decimal number, and it'll be we'll call it spawn range distance. And so this will be like the max that an object can spawn away from the player. So right now we're going between 10 and 15, which is okay to start with, maybe. Maybe we want to even go a little bit closer. So maybe we want to go between spawn range distance minus five. And maybe for the other one, we want to do spawn range distance. So now it'll spawn all the objects between 5 and 10 instead of 15 and 20. And then what we can do is we can then say, all right, if I'm colliding with the clock here, the pocket watch, let's set the pocket watch's spawn range distance a little bit further away. So let's set it to get spawn range distance plus 2. So each time I collect a pocket watch, it'll get a little bit further away. So you'll see, like right now, they spawn a little bit closer. But if I go and collide with this time, every time I do this, it's going to spawn a little bit further away from me and make it a little bit more challenging. So the player just can't keep grabbing time power ups. You can see every time it's a little bit further away. See, it spawned the bonus time all the way out there. So at some point, it might not be worth it for the player to go all the way out and get the bonus time. Maybe it is, but it makes it a little more challenging. What I want to do with the pumpkins is just maybe start them with a spawn location that's a lot closer. So not necessarily changing their spawn at random location, but maybe just starting that variable for the pumpkin instead of starting it at 10, starting it at 5. So it'll be between 0 and 5 or something like that. So we can just do that. So we can have the head of the pumpkins set spawn range distance to we can start it at 5. So it'll pick a number between 0 and 5 and move that much here. Now the only thing that I'm worried about is it actually spawning on the player, which is not something we want, but we'll see that it's actually pretty close now. And the other thing we could do is we could have it so that the pumpkin kind of respawns. Oh, that's a bug too. I'll fix that. We could have the pumpkin respawn. Maybe that's a little bit too close. Maybe we can go like somewhere in the middle there to give the player a little bit more room. But we could also have the pumpkin spawn at a random location, maybe every time the player scores here, so that they can't just avoid the one. They'll have to like. We'll see what this looks like. I'm just gonna copy it down there. So now, okay, I want to avoid the pumpkin, so I go this way. I scare some, but then the pumpkin kind of respawns there. So I accidentally picked that one up. So now if I go and get more points, right, I have no reason to go over there, but then the pumpkin will respawn. All right. And it is looking like it's interacting with the player just very briefly. And so maybe we want to just add a very slight duration to this so that if the object is visible, see how it's colliding with the player, and that's subtracting time. So what's happening is whenever we have the object turn to face the player and move forward, it actually is triggering a collision. So that's not necessarily what we want there. Well, one thing we could do is we could just add in an if statement here. If the bear is roaring, then don't subtract the time, because when the player is scaring a penguin, the player will be roaring. So that'll maybe prevent it. I don't know if this is the best thing, but this is again one of those things that's a little bit weird with the collisions. So if we roar, we shouldn't lose time anymore, because what was happening was the pumpkin was respawning, so it's moving to the player, and that was triggering a collision. At this point now, we don't lose time whenever we that. So that fixed that little bug. Now we still have this issue of going to timer equal to 0 when we subtract 5, because we have this if timer remaining equals 0 here. Move this up again. So if time remaining is 0, then time up is true. So what I want to do is if time remaining is less than or equal to 0. So I just want to change this. So we're going to change this to relational decimal number less than or equal to. It was, sorry, not relational decimal, relational whole number. So while time remaining is less than or equal to 0, then now if the player keeps running into pumpkins, oh, well, try that again. And see, my timer went to negative, but it still ended the game. Okay, so let's see. I think that's about it for today then. It was a lot, but we only got a few more things to add in: the respawn function, as well as some sound effects and things like that. So right now it's looking okay. We've got a decent little game going here. So I will see you tomorrow, and we'll finish this up.